within the,
Oh, sorry.
oh,
Yeah, that's just
got it. Okay,
advisory
so-
that we're being recorded.
I had to click a little thing. Anyway, so the community makes an agreement with FEMA that they will regulate development within the 100-year floodplain. And FEMA, in turn, makes flood insurance available through the National Flood Insurance Program in the community. Now, the way this works in Massachusetts, most of FEMA's standards for development within the floodplain are in state regulations, in particular the building code, but also in the Wetlands Protection Act and some other regulations. The remaining standards that aren't in state regulations are required to be adopted in a local regulation. And most communities adopt those standards into a zoning regulation, a zoning bylaw, or a zoning ordinance. Some communities adopt them in other regulations. Some communities adopt them in several different regulations, like general bylaws, Board of Health regulations, wetlands bylaws, and so forth. But Dover has had their local regulations in the zoning bylaw for a long time, as most communities do. So from time to time, there are two things going on right now that are requiring Dover and a lot of other communities to update their local regulations. One is we at the state level have a new state model bylaw. The model bylaw identifies all of the things that FEMA requires that aren't in state regulations. So all the things that have to be located in a local regulation are in that model bylaw. So that's one thing. In 2020, the state, working with FEMA, updated that model bylaw and added a number of things that FEMA had identified as being missing from the bylaw we had been using previously. So that's one thing, new model bylaw. The other thing is there is a mapping update that's taking place right now in the Charles River watershed that affects Dover. Dover is entirely within that watershed. So when there is a mapping update, that means that communities are required to update their local regulations to adopt those new maps, and those maps delineate the 100-year floodplain in which the standards are required to apply. So the Charles Watershed mapping update has been postponed a couple of times now. Originally, there was supposed to be what we call a letter of final determination issued in December of 2021. Because of some problems, that was postponed. It was then supposed to be issued in December 2022. And now it's actually been postponed again, and we expect it in December 2023. So letter of final determination means that the maps are complete, they're reviewed, they're ready to go. When the letter of final determination, or LFD, is issued, the maps are set to become finalized and go into effect 6 months from the date of the LFD. So because we're not expecting the LFD until December 2023, those new maps are not going to become effective until June of 2024. So that's a little bit more than a year away. So as of right now, Dover and other communities in the Charles watershed are not required to update their local regulation because of that mapping update. But we do have this new state model bylaw that has some things in it that communities are required to have in their local regulations. So communities can opt to update their local regulations based on the state model bylaw. And then, like Dover, if maps are also going to become effective a year from now, the bylaw will need to be updated again to adopt those new maps with the new map date once we know it. and the date for the new study that goes with the maps. So updating the bylaw right now will probably save Dover a few steps next year when the mapping update is expected to happen. So updating it now to meet the state model bylaw should mean a year from now, when we get the new mapping, the update's going to be easier. It should just be changing the dates for the maps. Now, if you'd like, I can go over what things are in the model bylaw and what things are new and probably weren't in your bylaw before. If anyone wants to hear me do that, I can do that. Okay, well, I guess hearing no objections. Anyone? Laura?
Well, I'm gonna leave it up to the board, but I don't know, Scott, what do you think? A little more information?
A little more information couldn't hurt anybody. Let's do it.
Okay, the model bylaw that was used to put together the draft that Laura sent out has in section 2 of that model bylaw are all of these standards that are required for communities that participate in the National Flood Insurance Program. A lot of those standards were in our old model bylaw and they are not new, but there are some things in here that are new, and I will just go over those rather briefly. So section 2, number 3, designation of a community floodplain administrator. We didn't do that before. FEMA is insisting that we do it now. So all communities participating in the National Flood Insurance Program have to designate a community floodplain administrator.
Eric,
Permits are,
excuse me, Eric,
Yep.
who have you seen designated that way in other towns?
in other towns, I would say most towns designate the building commissioner or inspector of buildings. Many towns designate the town planner, possibly conservation agent or town engineer. Those are the ones that building inspector, building commissioner would be the most common. And then here and there, I see town planners, 1 or 2 town engineers or conservation agents.
Great, thank you.
Sure. Okay, so permits required for proposed development in the floodplain overlay district. I want to be clear about this. There are development permits required for all development. Development is a defined term. One of the definitions which has been added is FEMA's definition for development, which includes a lot of things that you might not normally issue permits for. So be aware that development is not just construction of buildings or placement of fill, but it could be paving, mining, dredging, and other stuff. Change to the land form in general. So a lot of things will need to be permitted under that requirement for permits for development in the 100-year floodplain or the floodplain overlay district. I want to be clear, it doesn't have to be a permit per se, as long as somebody reviews the proposed development and approves it and documents it. So not every community is, requiring a actual permit with a permit fee and that sort of thing. But these things do have to be reviewed and documented. So
Excuse me, Eric,
requiring a permit.
what section are you on right now?
Okay, I'm reading from the model bylaw, Laura.
Okay, yeah, we numbered ours a little bit differently, but if you
Okay,
just tell
let me
me the
switch
heading,
over and go to your, because I have both of them.
that would be great.
Or I think it's a D2.
D2.
So I'm on page.
Yeah,
Okay,
so-
yeah, that
We're on
looks,
page
Right.
3.
yeah.
Part D. So part
Okay.
D1 is designation of the building inspector as floodplain administrator. And part 2 is requiring permits. And it also requires that the proponent obtain all local, state, federal permits. So the town has to make sure that that is also done. That is a new requirement.
Eric,
Okay.
excuse me, would the granting of a building permit by the building inspector suffice for proving that it was reviewed, approved, and documented?
Typically, no, it would be something separate. So you should have the floodplain development permit or review, and then whatever other permits. So this doesn't take the place of any other permits. It's more of an administrative task to make sure that the town is reviewing all of these things. Now, development might require also, like you said, a building permit, an order of conditions from conservation, maybe a board of health approval for some situations, but you have to have that floodplain development permit. So the floodplain administrator or someone he designates has reviewed this and made sure all of these other things have happened.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so back to Dover's draft. Okay, so Part E floodway encroachment is not new. Part F unnumbered A zones. We had that in our old model bylaw, but I am not certain that all communities had it in their local regulation. Part G is not new. We had that in our old model bylaw. H is not new either. I, recreational vehicles, that is a new requirement. We did not have that in our old model bylaw. When I say it's a new requirement, generally speaking, I mean it wasn't in our model bylaw. However, that is not a new requirement in the sense that FEMA is requiring something new. That's in FEMA's regulations. We didn't have it in our model. It actually, believe it or not, used to be covered in the building code, but then the building code was updated and we kind of lost track of where that requirement was. So that's why it's now in our model bylaw. J is not new. We've always required that. That's been in our model. K is new. That requirement to submit new technical data. So basically, if the town acquires data that base flood elevations have changed because of some project in the town, usually if base flood elevations are changing, it's some kind of project in a water course like a dam or a culvert or a bridge, and those things require hydraulic analysis, when they go through the permitting process. So if the town has that data, it has to be submitted to FEMA so they know about it and they can incorporate it into the mapping. And then there's a couple sections on variances. These, again, they're new to the model. They are not new to FEMA's requirements. The first one applies to variances to state building code. Now, state building code variances have to be issued at the state level, but the town has responsibility, some administrative responsibilities relating to those variances. So when a permit applicant appeals a decision by the town to the state board for a variance to the state building code, the town is required to do some of these administrative things related to the variance. And then M, variances to the local zoning bylaw. That's this bylaw that we're talking about right now. So variances that the town issues to the local floodplain bylaw have to meet these requirements. And then N, O, and P, those again, they're just administrative type requirements that FEMA requires. We didn't have them in our model previously, but FEMA wants them in there. You might actually already have abrogation or severability. I've reviewed literally hundreds of these bylaws. Many towns already have those things. If you do, you don't need to add it again, but you just have to tell me where it is so I can find it. Otherwise, having it here doesn't hurt. And that is the whole bylaw.
Very
Any-
helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
That's great. Well, originally we were going to try and, vote the language tonight, but we did just get comments from town council
I saw.
about, a half hour ago or so. So, I don't know if you had any quick thoughts about those.
I have
no,
quick thoughts. My quick thoughts are that I don't see a huge problem with having language like that, but I want a chance to actually sit down and I did a 5-minute scan of what was there, but
Yeah.
I need more time to actually look at it, and because I want to make sure that this is good to go before you go to town meeting with it. So my quick
Great.
thoughts are, I don't see a big, huge problem, but I would like to review it more thoroughly.
Great.
I have just a practical question. If the maps aren't going to be ready, is there a benefit in us pushing this through this year, or should we be considering delaying it a year and doing it all together? I'm just
That-
asking the question because
Okay.
when you mentioned that, I thought of it.
Right, it is up to the town. You have the option of not adopting this and waiting till next year. I think the advantage to doing it now is you get all of these big major changes in language done now. Next year, when it's required, you will only have to change the dates of the maps, once we know the new dates for the flood insurance rate map and flood insurance study.
But we won't be in full compliance until next year when the new maps are available.
You will be in full compliance if you update this year to the state model bylaw, you will be in full compliance.
Understood. Thank you.
Scott, one of the other reasons that I'd like to see this done this year is that we've already delayed it 1 year. I don't think it looks right to keep moving it out. The other issue is that the town meeting working group has spent several meetings now looking at the 30+ warrant articles to cull them and maneuver them and group them to ensure a one-night town meeting. And we offered that we would move the village center bylaws out to the fall, so that only the floodplain and the ADU bylaws were being represented at the Maytown meeting by the planning board. So we've already made that commitment, and I don't want to go back. We don't know what the May 2024 town meeting will look like, and we could find ourselves squeezed if there are some major issues. So right now we have a configuration of warrant articles that I think is very manageable, and Jim Repetti feels that it's very manageable for one night town meeting.
Makes sense. Thank you.
So Eric, this has been very, very helpful. What I'd like to suggest, we are trying to get all our bylaws firmed up before the warrant committee open hearing on March 13th. So that gives us about a month for you and Laura and Scott and Nina Pickering Cook, our town council, to get all this stuff resolved so that we can go to the open hearing on March 13th with a bylaw that meets the state's approval, that meets our town council's approval, and which has been voted by the planning board, which would have to be done no later than March 6th. At our March 6th meeting, preferably at our February 27th meeting, depending how quickly you and Nina can review and get to a consensus. Laura, does that sound reasonable?
Yeah, that sounds well.
Right now, I think the only thing we have on our let's see what we have for the 27th.
I think it really needs to be the 27th because we're going to be preparing the legal ad after that.
Okay,
And the legal ad is going to run March 9th and March 16th, unless the planning board wants to do something very different with a public hearing date. So we can't get it into the paper. If it's voted on March 6th, there
Okay.
won't be time.
Okay, then February 27th it is.
Do we,
Okay,
while we're all on here, do we want to find a date that works for all parties to reconnect on this offline? Or outside of one of these formal meetings, I should say?
what dates are good for you, Scott? Are
Um,
there certain times or days?
how much time do you and Eric need to review Nina's comments?
I can get comments to Laura next week, probably early next week, say Tuesday.
Yeah, so do we want to aim for something like toward the end of next week?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Maybe Friday the 17th? Is that too late?
No, there's sometimes I can do it during the day on Friday. I know I've got one thing going on that day, but
I would just say, Scott, just one thing. I think it's really important that that we get Nina involved, looped into this as well.
oh yeah, I thought that's what Scott was saying. Maybe I
But we don't know what
misunderstood.
Nina's schedule is. Perhaps Laura, you can
Exactly.
just sort of send out an email to the
Okay.
to the three others plus you, Laura.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, and get something on the books. We've got to pin Nina down.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, just Laura, just let me know if maybe we can get a couple dates and times from her, like middle to end of next week, and then the three of us can figure out what works among the three of us.
Yeah, I mean, I think we may have to have like a 3 or 4-way phone call with her. Because I think there may have to be some discussion between her and Eric on some of these things and just trying to work it out.
Okay. And then in parallel, Laura, Carol, I feel like I need to update the deck a little bit just to reflect the reality that we're not going to have maps this year, and that we're really just approving the changes, the updates to the language, and that we'll be resubmitting this again next year once we have the revised maps.
We do actually have preliminary maps. I mean, Eric, are those going to change?
Well, there are preliminary maps out right now that you can look at, but that's not what the bylaw change is right now. So the bylaw change isn't to adopt those preliminary maps, it's to adopt the new language in the model bylaw. Certainly, people can look at the preliminary maps that are online, yes.
Okay, I mean, you had put those dates in that I think corresponded to the 2020 maps. I think that's the
Right.
date that's now in the bylaw.
That's
So
correct.
if you could just, maybe you could advise us whether that date should just change back to the old maps
Okay,
or what?
the Norfolk County flood insurance rate map and flood insurance study has a date of July 6th, 2021, I believe. So that's what the current Norfolk County mapping is dated. Now, Dover's panels have a different date. That's 2012. But if you're going to reference the Norfolk County flood insurance rate map and flood insurance study, you should use the date on the countywide map. So there is a date change, but that doesn't mean that your map panels are changing.
All right, I'm just looking at the Dover one, and I have the last update was July 2012, and that the current effective maps are from June 2020.
Okay,
Is that
That-
wrong?
you are probably right. I was doing that off the top of my head, so let me just,
Well, in the language you gave us for the bylaw,
2021,
it
yeah.
says 2021.
yes, that's
And-
correct. July 6th, 2021.
Okay, so the current effective maps are from July of 21.
So we go with those as opposed to the ones that were in the building department, which said, I think said 2020 on them.
Okay, there's a little bit of confusion going on.
Yeah,
The Dover's panels are all dated 2012, okay? So when a county-wide map changes, not all the panels change, okay? So the date of the county map is July 6, 2021. The individual dates on the panels that are effective in Dover are 2012. I don't know the exact date, but they're
Okay, so
2012.
the last Dover update was July 2012. The current effective county maps are from July 2021. And new maps are expected by December to be effective in June 2024.
Yes.
New Dover maps, I should say.
And those will be Norfolk County. So pretty
So
much
the new maps will be Dover or
they will
county?
not be Dover. It's going to be Norfolk County. All the
Got it.
mapping is countywide now.
So for the purposes
Okay.
of for the purposes of a bylaw, from a legal perspective, we should be referencing the Norfolk County map date.
Okay,
Is that
you
correct?
can do it either way. The
Does that
model
relate-
bylaw gives you an option of doing it two different ways. The simple way is to reference the county map. And that way you don't have to list every single panel. Okay, so if you say the panels that are in Dover for the Norfolk County flood insurance rate map dated July 6, 2021, that's all you have to say.
Okay,
You can, at your option, list individual panels. If you list individual panels, you have to make sure you list them all and you get the correct suffix with all of them and you get the correct date for all of them.
say no more.
Okay?
yeah. There were 12 panels, I think, for
Forget it.
Dover.
Forget it.
There were a lot of panels.
So Scott and Laura, in addition to working on the actual bylaw wording with Eric and Nina, you'll note that some of my questions were operational in nature. So I suggest that you might want to speak with Walter and make sure that he's on board with being the floodplain administrator.
Yep.
So we don't get into what we got into with the ZBA last year on the ADU.
Okay. I did mention it to him, but it's always good to mention it again.
And did he said, sure, I will be?
Well, he said, okay, I don't know if he was excited about, having another job, to add to his, all his responsibilities, but he was willing to do it.
So I think once we have a bylaw draft that Eric and Nina and you and Scott and Laura all agree to, that should also go out to Walter in an email, copying Carl Valenti, making sure that Walter, here's the bylaw. Thank you so much. It's our understanding that you will be the floodplain administrator, just to close the loop.
Yep.
Because in my quick review of Nina's stuff tonight, a lot of her questions were operational.
Yep. Yep. Sounds good.
Okay. All right. So we'll stand by, Laura, for feedback from Nina on her availability. And we'll get something on the calendar for middle to late next week. I will update the deck to reflect some of what Eric shared. And I'll share that with you all. And we'll get confirmation that Walter has accepted what it sounds like he's being voluntold to do.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sounds good.
One question I'm going to pose, there are pros and cons to it. And that is, Laura, I believe you said that there were 30 to 40 residences in Dover that that are in the floodplain. Was that the right number you mentioned to me?
I think there are 40 buildings that are in the floodplain. And
40
there
local
are,
buildings, yeah, that require.
yeah, there are
flood insurance,
31 policies.
So basically 31 homeowners, basically,
Yeah,
with 40
well,
buildings.
31.
Not necessarily homeowners. They may not all be
yeah.
homes. It's just there are 40 buildings that
Okay,
are impacted by this.
okay. Is there any reason to notify them prior to town meeting of this?
I think it can get really tricky because people tend to get nervous about FEMA and costs and the federal government and the federal government taking over people's lives. I mean, there's so many adjacent issues that maybe it's better to just let go of it.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. I just wanted to, put it out there.
I mean, particularly where it's such a small percentage of the whole town.
Yep.
I mean,
Okay.
certainly, if anyone has questions, I mean, if they want to know if something's changed or they're in the floodplain and they'd like to find out if there's been any change, or they're near a floodplain and they want to come and find out whether they're now in a floodplain. Maybe we should have some time when people can come into the office and take a look at the maps.
Well, I think what we should do is, and I don't imagine that we're going to get, if we get any input, it's going to be after the open hearing. And when everything
Okay.
goes to the website and the selectman's office and Felicia actually start, communicating with the town about the particular articles. I just want to make sure that we don't get into the situation we got into last year where I was told that there was no problem with the easements because everything was taken care of in conversations in the planning board office with town residents, only to find out that that was not the case.
Yeah.
Which is why we had to pull the easement article. So if people start calling you, just keep track of it, keep track of their questions, keep track of your answers. So we sort of have a log.
Sure.
Citizen
I have
comments.
one
Yes,
thing
sir.
to add. We do expect revised preliminary maps to come out soon for Norfolk County. So I have no idea what they're going to look like or what's been changed, but there are preliminary maps out. There are going to be revised preliminary maps. It's my understanding that the changes are issues that were identified during what they call the quality review phase. And that's what's held up the maps from being released. So I don't believe the flood information has changed. It's labeling information. But I just wanted to be clear about that. There are going to be new preliminary maps. They're supposed to come out this week. So you know.
Okay, so they'll be available in the planning board office. If anybody calls, they could come in or go online, I guess, to hopefully to take a look at these preliminary maps. Not that we're accepting them at the May 2023 town meeting anyway. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, well, I think this has been a great discussion. I think we have a good plan with a goal of February 27th to be able to vote on an actual bylaw. So Eric,
Good.
thank you so much. You've been incredibly helpful and very informative.
You're welcome.
And we look forward to working with you over the next couple of weeks to finalize all this. Thank you so
Okay.
much.
Very good.
Thanks a lot. Have a good evening.
Thanks, Eric.
You too.
Thanks,
Bye.
Eric. Okay.
Wow, nothing is simple.
No. Sorry.
Okay. Anything else on floodplains? Hey, Bill.
Hi, guys. How are you?
Good.
Sorry, I was listening for the longest time, but
Oh, that's okay.
I late work.
Not a problem. Round and around. Then let us move on to just some quick updates. I'm going to turn this over to Val, who did an absolutely incredible and amazing job on Saturday
Oh,
with
thank
the
you.
tree preservation workshop, which was better
Yeah.
attended than our village center workshop.
It was a huge surprise, especially given the weather and the many frozen pipes throughout Dover. So, but yeah, we had in total 32 people who attended, and that didn't include the three students from the Conway School. But yeah, it was a great group of people, very energetic and motivated and excited to see this moving forward. We had a couple people asked to be on the committee, which is always a good sign, and many who certainly want to attend our next meeting. So we introduced to this group, we introduced the tree committee because it's a new committee. I anticipated that many people haven't heard about the tree preservation committee, and you know, as you know, typical people, I'm sure, are like, what is this? Why is it being formed now? What is the purpose of it? So it was good to be able to get in front of them and give them a little background as to how we came to creating the tree preservation committee now and what our goals are for the next 2 years with this committee. So the Conway School students did a fantastic job. It was modeled very similarly to the Village Center project. And so we had 3 tables of people working together and encouraging their dialogue and talking about their concerns with trees and preservation and maintenance, and also what Dover has done well, where they would like to see Dover putting some more focus, and then educational topics that they were interested in. So those were kind of the highlights of the meeting. And so it was great. And we will be having another one with them, with the Conway School, I believe early March. It'll be late February, early March. We're working that date out. And as soon as I get the summary documents from our Conway group, I will pass those around to the planning board. So yeah, thank you, Carol.
Val did a great introduction of how the committee was formed and why, and wonderful closing. I will also remark that I only knew about a quarter of the people who attended, which is actually a good thing, because it means that the folks that attended aren't your normal government junkie types.
Right.
So
Yes.
clearly we have reached a bunch of folks who are not involved normally with anything to do with town government,
Yeah.
but who are interested in this topic. So that I thought was wonderful to see as well.
I agree. And I had many emails from folks who wanted to be there, but couldn't because they were either out of town or had commitments with their kids, or other things keeping them. So I think if it were to be, you know, with our next one, I hope that we can get even more.
Great.
Thank you, Val. Any comments or questions for Val before we move on? Okay, then quickly an update on the Village Center Initiative. Bill and I attended a gathering in the Great Hall on January 24th that had been sponsored by the COA, although there were also non-COA people there, which was good because we also promoted it throughout our social media stuff. Bill gave the presentation, so I'm going to turn that over to him to sort of summarize.
Yeah, I would just say that it was very similar to the presentation that I gave before at the Dover Library that I know all of you had attended. And so we really kind of just talked about the genesis of why we are doing this. And so I won't bore you with those details because you've heard it all before. But the one thing I will share with you is that what is encouraging, and Carol and I talked about this, is that the more we do talk to the residents here in the town, there is just an overriding consensus that our work here is really warranted and felt by the other residents of the town, that we really, we need to make some improvements. There's so much of an opportunity. And surprisingly, just from the feedback that I've been hearing from the commentaries of residents, is we all seem to have a very, the bandwidth of disparity is quite narrow, meaning that we all seem to really agree about what we need to do here. So it's encouraging. So really where matters, should I, Carol, should I sort of talk about next steps at this point?
Oh, please
Or
do. Yep.
yeah, so as you all know, Ted Brovitz and his consulting group have provided some very extensive language as it relates to proposed bylaws that would be implemented to the village. And rightly so, and Carol in her wisdom said, there is just no way at all that given the depth and the breadth of all of the issues that they're addressing, that we could conceivably ever get this thing approved at town council, at the town meeting. So really where our work right now is I have two objectives, is I'd like to really read through it in much more careful detail and extract from Ted's language. If we had to sort of say, what are the key things that we want to get accomplished at town meeting, highlight those 3 or 4 points that are our objectives, and to really synthesize those points. And Carol and I are going to work on that together. And so you'll be hearing more about that coming forward. But that's really what it is we see this as a 3 or maybe even a longer year process. Let's feed it to the town in small size bites, because we think we'll be much more successful in getting it approved if that's the case. The other point that that we've talked about is that when you look at the village and you look at a number of the parcels of commercial land that are in the village, the majority of those parcels are actually owned by town residents. And so they have interest as business owners, landowners, but also as town residents. And so one of the things that I would like to do is to seek another meeting with those individuals to really begin to get some consensus and input from them, because ultimately as this progresses, their input is important. And I want to sort of have some anticipation of what those are and address any of their issues and concerns. So that's part of what's on my to-do list in advancing this process. I think that's about it from my side. Carol, anything else or comments from anybody?
No, I think you covered it. It was a great presentation. It was very, Bill did another great job. I think it was very well received. Just to reiterate, we are moving it to a fall town meeting. And when I offered that to the town meeting working group, I made it very clear that we could not wait until May of 2024 because the risk of not having guardrails was too great. And there seemed to be an understanding of that. The expectation is that there's going to be a full meeting because of the Hell Reservation Conservation Restriction initiative. But there are also some who don't think that even that's going to be ready by the fall. But as of right now, at least, we have a commitment that there will be a fall meeting and that the ADU will be on it. Because remember, once you get a town meeting bylaw approved, it then has to go up to the Attorney General's office at the state level to be approved. So that takes a while as well. So you have to assume, 2 to 3 months before a bylaw that gets voted at town meeting is actually approved and operational at the town level. So hopefully we'll have something that we can use by the end of the calendar year 2023. Great, thank you, Bill. Just a quick update on the ADU. Jody is out of the country, someplace much warmer than here. I took the opportunity, since there seemed to be an attentive audience, after Bill left, I said if everybody's willing to wait a couple minutes, we'll do a quick ADU. So we actually spent about another half hour on the ADU. That too was well received. There were some questions which we had already anticipated. So I was pleased with that discussion as well. Laura and Jody and I had quite a meeting with Nina Pickering Cook, Town Council, the end of last week, where we went over the bylaw word by word, sentence by sentence. And we have one that is getting close to completion. Jody has sent it out to Alan Fryer, Chair of the ZBA, to close that loop, and she has requested that that the ZBA and Alan get back to her within the next 2 weeks or so. Hopefully that will go smoothly, and then we can get it approved. We also asked Nina to send a copy of the draft bylaw to the Board of Health. And I've requested with her support that the wording supports the activities and statutory responsibilities of the Board of Health, so that we can then get the Board of Health to vote on it to show that their support and their agreement with the wording, which was an issue with the version last year. And it looks as if we will have the opportunity at the Council on Aging's meeting in April. I'm waiting for the exact date. I think it's going to be like the first week of April. I've asked the COA board if we could come in to present the ADU and hopefully have them vote their support, so that when we go to town meeting, we can say we have the support of the Board of Health, and we have the support of the Council on Aging, and we have the support of the ZBA. So that's the intent. And we'll keep you informed on all that. The agenda for this coming next Monday's meeting is the ADU bylaw. So we hope to have something that's, 95% done by then, if not 100% done. And we'll get that to you as soon as we can for you to look at and read. Devil's in the details on these things, so please take a look. I think that's it on town meeting. Laura, have I missed anything? What about all these hearing dates?
Well, I was just going to mention, I think we're technically on track, but you have a little bit of flexibility. If you wanted to have the public hearing on April 3rd, I think you can do that as opposed to March 27th. But there's going to come a point where you're not going to be able to make any more changes to wording unless you do amendments from town meeting floor. And I
Right.
think everyone wants to avoid that like the plague. It's, it's difficult.
It's very messy
Yeah.
and quite frankly, very rare.
Okay. Good to know.
Yeah.
Good to know.
Not that we've
So,
done a lot of zoning bylaws.
yeah. So hopefully the next week or so, we'll have more in-depth meeting with Nina and, really get things resolved. So she, is completely on board with what the language is.
Do we, when we vote on a date for the public hearing and put it into the notice procedure, which I guess is the newspaper?
Yeah. Well, it's
Does
the newspaper and about 5 other things, but
Does the wording of the bylaw have to be firm at that point, or does it just have to be firm at the time of the actual open hearing?
what I've always done, which I believe is spelled out in 40A, is that you have to have a copy of the language when the legal ad is published. And all the language doesn't have to be published, but a copy of what's being proposed has to be available at the planning board and at the town clerk, at those 2 offices in town hall. And it has to be posted somewhere. And generally that would be the bulletin board near the town clerk's office at that side entrance.
Right, so let's say, we have a
somewhere like
bylaw
that.
draft. Let's call it draft A. That's
Yeah.
available at the time of the legal notice,
Yep,
okay, which is X number through 3 weeks or whatever it is before the actual hearing,
yep.
right? By the time the actual hearing comes along, we have draft B.
Yeah.
Is that
Um,
legal?
I don't, it's legal, But in terms of the smoothness of the process, I don't know what other publications you have. I'm used to towns that had the warrant being published, very soon, but within like 2-3 weeks of town meeting.
We don't publish any bylaws in the warrant. It's all
Okay.
that says available in the planning board or the town clerk's office.
Okay. Well, I think you can probably make changes in between
Okay,
when the legal ad is published, and as long as the language in the article that's voted on says, move to approve, blah, 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 as printed in the warrant hearing notice, or whatever that later notice is called.
yeah. So in Dover, the wording of the article that's made at town meeting
Yeah,
for me to accept is prepared by Nina a week or two before the town meeting at best. So it's not
Okay.
in the published blue book that we have. So we've got, it's not done so black and white. So
Okay.
I just want to make, so you just keep us informed about when we have to vote to actually, to meet the, if we assume a April 3rd public hearing, then you back off and give us the dates that when we have to approve everything by. Because right now, you've got it for,
we were gonna try for March 27th.
right, yeah, okay,
With the meetings taking place, every 2 weeks, you may not really buy any time by doing that.
right, well, we'll talk about it offline, but.
Yeah, yeah,
okay, Okay,
yeah. And I'm also gonna check in with Nina about her take on, finalizing the language.
okay. Because I see on the town calendar that that the interim TA has requested final language for both articles on February 9th. We just let Carl know that we'd have it if Nina would respond to our emails on time.
Yeah,
So, so we don't have to set the date for the public hearing, which is on the agenda for tonight. We'll hold that off for another meeting.
okay, okay,
Um,
but yeah, all right.
Right.
Um,
Is that correct?
Yeah, that's okay.
Okay.
Yep.
But we do have to approve the minutes of December 5th. So I know that those are sent out to everybody. Does anybody have any comments on them? If not, I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes of December 5th as submitted to all of you. Do I hear a second?
Second,
Okay, I'll take a roll call vote. Bill Motley,
yes, approved.
Scott Friedman,
Approved.
George Sidgwick,
Approved.
and Carol Lisbon approved. Okay, thank you very much. One last item. And looks like you're all sitting down. So we have received a application from Jonathan Fryer to amend the car club project that we spent hundreds of hours on this past fall. The amendment is quite substantial. And I know that Laura's initial reaction is that this really isn't an amendment, that it's really a new submission. So we have told Jonathan that he can come to the February 27th planning board meeting. And we will be notifying all the abutters of same, as we did back in the fall. Laura is working with Jonathan on various aspects of his application, which we believe are lacking, as well as reviewing the many changes that the amendment indicates compared to the orders of conditions and the plans that we voted on before. So, Laura, you have anything else to say about that?
No, I mean, just if well, I was gonna prepare something for the February 27th meeting, but I wasn't really gonna talk about it publicly until, the board, has something to review.
That's fine. So, Laura's going to try to get out to all of us, as early as possible. She's got a lot on her plate right now. We've got to get these bylaws done too. So that you have at least, a week, if not closer to 2 weeks, to review all the material that she sends out to you.
Can I ask a question? A
Sure.
couple questions. So we obviously have a full agenda, a lot of initiatives that we're in process. What is our obligation as the planning board to respond to this amended request?
Well, I think you do have an obligation to respond.
I understand that.
You need to,
I'm just asking what is that obligation?
you need to let him know whether it's a preliminary site plan, a full site plan, a modification, or a new application.
And when do we need to let him know that? Is that at the time of the February 27th meeting, prior to or subsequent?
I'm reading your bylaw that there isn't any definite date where you have to sit down and meet on something, but he has let me know, Jonathan's let me know that he feels that January 27th is already pushing the envelope. I don't think it's pushing the envelope at all, but your initial meeting is just to determine whether he needs to give you more information or whether this is a complete application. So once you decide that, then he has to give you information, quickly, and the board has to take action within 30 days of your decision on that. So say he comes in and you meet with him on the 27th, which is a meeting that was set aside for development applications anyway. You look at his application, you say, this isn't complete. You need to give us, XYZ pieces of information.
Can I stop you for 1 second?
Yep.
Is it, and I don't mean to interrupt you, but do we have to the question I asked earlier, do we have to tell him during that meeting what is complete or not incomplete, or are we able to say at that meeting, thank you for answering our questions, we will review it internally and respond back to you with what additional information we need, or do we need to do that during the meeting?
You don't have to do it during the meeting, but you have to do it within 30 days of that initial meeting.
We have to get back to him within 30 days with a decision or with questions?
With a decision.
Okay.
Once the application is complete.
Thank you.
Once the application is complete, I can tell you right now that the application is far from complete.
Right.
Okay. Now, if you remember in the fall, it was like playing 20 questions with your kids, right? And trying to pull
Yeah.
teeth to get information. That's not going to happen again.
So Carol, can I just ask a few more questions here? So he is going to come to us with a whole host of new issues. And so is the role of the planning board to look at the it's a site plan review by the planning board. And so what are the thresholds that we will be looking at? This may be an obtuse question. What are the thresholds from which we've already approved what his previous work, what he originally submitted? He's going to resubmit something entirely different presumably. What is the metric? What are the guidelines from which we are going to be looking at his resubmission and see whether or not it is acceptable or not?
So I'll answer a little bit differently and then turn it over to Laura to explain it even better. I suggest you all look at this, chapter 185-36, that's site plan review. And there's a section on preliminary site plan review.
Yeah,
and a section about full site plan review. Okay.
right.
You, as members of the board, are going to have to make a decision and read that stuff before you get to the meeting,
I remember this.
okay? And I am also going to urge every one of you, which is why we're going to try to get this to you as soon as we possibly can, given everything else that's on Laura's plate. We cannot have a reprise of the previous site plan review, which was at the same time trying to address the needs of the applicant while doing a site plan review tutorial for planning board members, quite
Yeah.
frankly.
Yeah,
Okay, you can't do this again.
no,
At this point, we've all done enough site plan reviews and we should have been reading, we should know the bylaw well enough that we go there at a meeting to hear the applicant. And our questions are to the applicant about his intent and his plans, not about what his plan, how his plan gets reflected in our bylaw. If you have questions like that, I expect each and every one of you to meet with Laura ahead of time and get those answers and get your questions answered that way.
yeah, I agree. So, and if though we need to meet with Laura to go over these questions, and some of these questions might require council's input, is that opportunity exist for us as well?
Always, as long as you do it with enough time.
Right.
Contacting Laura on a Thursday or a Friday when the meeting is on Monday isn't going to cut it.
Sure. Yeah,
So, we may all have very similar questions. Laura's going to keep track of everybody's questions and her answers, either at the time or after research. And she will share with all of us what she has learned from all of us as we work with Laura on this.
and again, it's chapter 185, and what was the rest of that?
36.
36?
Just double check that.
And my question, Laura, maybe you can answer this, is I think step one, if I understand it, is he's submitting these plans as an amendment to his currently approved plan. Is that right? He's saying these are minor changes. Is that his position?
That's his position. Yeah.
And so, who is the decision-making body to decide? Is that the planning board who decides whether or not it's, okay, so that's
It's
our
you.
first step.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
the planning board.
Yeah, okay. Okay,
Laura
I
will
didn't
be
know if that
making-
was you, because I know that you were given the ability to accept the amendments if he had some for changes and things and decide if it needs to come back to the board or not. That's the way I understood, that the town planner had the ability to decide if it needs to come back to the board. So I just didn't know if that authority also extended to deciding if it needed to be a new application or.
No, this will be a planning board decision based upon a recommendation from Laura.
Yeah, sure, sure.
Here are all the reasons that given
Yeah.
your bylaw 185-36,
Mhm.
I would recommend that the planning board view this as a new application with a full site plan review.
Got it. Okay.
Okay,
So that really is the gating. That is the primary question that as the planning board, we will need to address.
that will be the first question that we need to address.
Yeah.
And depending on what the board votes, if we say this requires a full site plan review, for example, then, and that vote is made, there's really no further discussion or topics to be discussed at that point. Fryer is given his directive by the planning board. He now knows that he has to go out and conduct a full site plan review. If that's how the board votes, But-
Well, I guess I would just add one thing, not to interrupt, but I think I would add one thing, and that is that there is a time clock that starts after you take that vote. If you decide that the application is incomplete, within 30 days, you have to make a final decision. He has to get material back to you in time for you to meet on it and to consider it. And then at the end of that 30 days, if you don't feel that he's given you enough information, you can make a decision then to deny the application. If you feel that he's given you enough information and there are conditions you want to impose, then you can do that, or you can just approve it as something minor. But whichever of those three things you do has to be done within 30 days of
And
that
Eric-
first
Wait a minute,
decision.
excuse me, Laura. I need to clarify something because I thought it was 30 days after the planning board deems that the application is complete. Not after. we
I'm sorry, that's correct. That's correct. But
So we could vote on February 27th that we want to have a full site plan review of a new application. And by the way, Jonathan, the application isn't complete and the clock does not start yet.
okay, I'm sorry, I'm just.
So, yeah,
Right?
so walk me through that one more time. I just want to make sure I understand what you're saying, Carol.
Well, I just want to make sure that my understanding is correct because I haven't really come across this before, other than the general conversation we had about this back in the fall. When we seemed to.
Okay, so regardless of whether he's going to file a formal site plan or the board is going to accept a preliminary site plan, he has to file a preliminary site plan as the first step. So he does that. Besides the drawings, he's got to have the narrative statement about the reason for the change. And then he's also got to describe all the approvals he needs from other town boards.
None of
Then,
which he has done.
yeah, none of which he has done. And then you review the application to determine whether it's complete. And let's see.
And then we deem whether it's a complete preliminary site plan review, at which point we will then have 30 days.
Yeah, and then
Right.
you have 30 days, and then you can either approve, request more information, or determine that it requires a full site plan application.
But if we decide that the preliminary site plan is not sufficient and we go to a full site plan review.
Yeah.
Then once again, the 30 days only begins when we feel that there's all the material for a full site plan review has been submitted.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
So Jonathan's view of the narrative for this minor amendment, which doubles the size of the building and doubles the number of spots and paves the driveways and does an easement on a property abutting it for access, was not to provide any narrative whatsoever, but to take it upon himself to redline our order of conditions so that he could inform us as to what we needed to change in our order conditions to meet his new application.
Well, that was very gracious of him.
I'm very gracious of him, appreciate the work.
So in that, so what is do we know what the new revised size of the facility, the building is, square footage wise?
It's all in the application.
Okay.
I'm
yeah,
gonna
sorry.
give you some, some kind of summary of it, so you don't
Yeah.
have to, do too much digging.
Great.
And I'm actually hoping to get that out, because I know it's going to take some time to make these appointments with Nina and finish up all this, language crunching with the zoning bylaws. I'm hoping to actually get something out in the next couple of days to all of you. So there should be a big, plenty of time to look at it. But, don't let it go until the last week or so.
Well, I think-
Take a
I
look
think-
at it
I
and
think
let me know
the-
what questions you have.
Yeah, and I think one thing that we should really do here on this particularly because, Jonathan's he's an attorney, he understands the rules and whatnot, is I think a little bit of the last call, and I think partly I was to blame, was that there was some interpretive dialogue going on actually during the meeting with Nina as to what was exactly the purpose of the planning board goal, what was our responsibility during that meeting. And Carol, I know you were absent from that meeting. So to the point Carol's making, to the extent that we can address all of those question marks prior to the meeting, it'll probably make it a much more efficient lineal discussion, I would hope.
Sure. Yeah.
If we don't all as board members, and this goes for every single one of us, if we don't feel comfortable with what we're supposed to be doing
Yeah,
at the meeting, then we will be on the defensive the entire time,
and that's not good.
right? And that's
Yeah.
not good. So,
Okay.
we will also, Laura will also, in her conversations with Jonathan, make it clear that we expect that he provides us with a narrative that lists and explains every single change that has been made to what we approved months ago.
So that's February 27th.
So that'll be on the February 27th agenda.
Okay, good.
And Laura will also send all of you, to refresh your memories, the 50 some odd orders of condition that were items in our previous, in the approval that we've already done.
Yeah.
You know, my take is just look, you know, not spending a lot of time on this so far, but my take is that an awful lot of the conditions that we approved are still relevant and really don't need to be touched. They're just probably 6 to 12 that will be impacted by the changes that he's made, if in fact we approve it.
But I think I think one thing it's important to note is that this car club has been in the works with Jonathan, I think, as early as 2004, if I am correct. And the original design was to accommodate 17 vehicles. The board approved the facility. I think the number of cars that could be stored was actually doubled, if I recall correctly.
Yep.
And so now it sounds, although I haven't seen the documents yet, that he's seeking to double that even again, once again. So he's really changing, it appears, the scope of the size of this project relative to what was originally being proposed before the planning board.
Which it's an excellent point, Bill, and it's one of the reasons that I think many of you will want to consider a full site plan review, because the whole scope of it has changed so much. I've also asked Sue to start putting together a file with plans and drawings that we've seen over the last year during our site plan review applications of what's been submitted to show us how the building that we're being asked to opine on fits into the neighborhood and fits into the site and relates to the primary house and all that type of stuff. Because as you will see, this new design is interesting.
Yeah. And is this information, I assume, is now available for the public to see as well? I assume it's all public
Yeah.
information. now.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And we have been getting phone calls and I mean, there are certain days like today where I'm by myself in that office. And if I, get on the phone for, a half hour, it's difficult because people are coming in and out and so on. So I am going to call back, particularly now that, and certainly I've got to let Jonathan know. I mean, we can't really have much more discussion of this without him being present, just procedurally. So I'm glad you did decide on a date so that everybody can be informed of what the date's gonna be that you're gonna talk about this. Did that make sense?
Totally.
Okay,
Yeah,
good.
yeah. Yeah.
So I think with that wonderful news, I have nothing else to share. Does anybody else have anything to share? Okay. So I think we're still swimming upstream, but we're making some progress. And you know, I hope over the next couple of weeks, we'll get these 2 bylaws taken care of. And we can proceed with other things as well. So please, I urge you, please, I beg you, please, when Laura gets you the stuff, please pay attention to it. Please get her your questions out of respect for Laura and not putting her on the spot at a meeting. Please give her the opportunity to hear what your concerns, to address them one-on-one, to do the research she needs to answer your questions, so that we don't have to go through that at the actual board meeting.
Thanks, Carol.
You're welcome. So I'm going to make a motion to adjourn the meeting at 8:19. Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor, please say aye. Let's
Aye.
see. Aye, everybody. I see aye for everybody. Okay, thank you. And Bill, I know you will not be at the 13th meeting. Is that correct? You're on.
You're on mute.
Sorry, that is correct. I've got a previous client engagement.
Not a problem. George and Scott, will you be at the meeting on next Monday?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, and Jody will be there, so we'll be all set.
And Carol, one last question that maybe it's for the benefit of the group. If once we receive the documentation from Laura, I certainly think I'm going to want to go through it, read it carefully, and we'll probably want to have questions for Laura and for council. Is there assuming that that's fine, I can put it in writing, but does it make sense that if other members of the committee have questions that we can together have an internal meeting, or do we have to sort of work independently on our questions?
That's unfortunately, that's against the open meeting law. So the coordinator and accumulator of everybody's questions and concerns will be Laura.
Right,
And
but in the efforts of avoiding redundancies, both of attorney's fees or Laura's time.
Laura will be working with the attorney directly. Okay, so she'll accumulate everybody's questions and work with Nina to get answers to those questions. And then she can accumulate the questions and the answers, and she can then send that out to all of us. But we can't communicate amongst ourselves on any of this.
Even if we were to schedule an open public hearing to do that?
Well, then it's another open meeting and Jonathan has to be there as the applicant.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just,
But
I'm just trying to-
still, if you have clear questions,
yeah,
and we can probably get Nina to come to the February 27th meeting, I'm hoping. And then, I think it still gives her some food for thought before the meeting, so she can, research some of the things that you have questions about.
I think we've learned I think we have learned that it's best to make sure that Nina knows exactly what we're going to ask her and we know exactly what she's going to say in response. So I think all that we need to have Nina there
yeah.
to address things that Jonathan may bring up.
I'm just gonna
Want
say,
to have Nina
Carol,
there to address what we are bringing up. That has to be done.
I think the concern I have is that sometimes putting everything in writing and sometimes you have follow-up questions. I just can't understand why we as a committee, if we have questions, can't have the ability to have a dialogue. It seems overreaching that we can't speak to council to specific questions relating to the town bylaws. It seems that to have to put this in writing and have the answer come back to us either through an interpreter, or it just seems highly inefficient. And I don't know if other committee members think I'm overreaching here, but it just seems that we need to be properly educated. And this seems to me like a highly inefficient way of trying to get ourselves educated to a process that is we all agreed, acknowledge this is a very complicated process. And the members here aren't even fully clear on how these processes work. So I'm just trying to.
So this is the problem with government versus the rest of the world, okay? Because if we want to have a meeting with all the board members or whoever wants a quorum of members, okay, to meet with Nina, to hash out all this kind of stuff, it has to be an open meeting. And if it's an open meeting, anybody can attend.
So are you saying that when the selectmen have to meet with council just to sort of have guidance and direction, that any party, any individual that has any interest in party to an issue being discussed has to be present at that council meeting as well? We can't caucus internally?
No, you
to
cannot.
discuss issues?
It depends on the situation. If you're being sued, then you can. Or if it's something involving sale of real estate, if it's one
So
of the,
what Laura's
Yeah.
saying is that you heard about committees going into executive session. Right? So there's a very, very clear, just look it up. It's a Mass General law. It gives you exactly every reason why you can go into executive session.
Yeah,
This is
Okay.
not one of them.
yeah.
Maybe
I share
maybe a
Share
compromise.
Bill's frustration for what it's worth.
Maybe a compromise could be that if there's another member who has a lot of questions, that like maybe there could be a non-quorum meeting. Is that a possibility?
Or it sounds to me that what I'm hearing from is to Scott's point, is that everybody has to be independently submitting questions to Laura, which then are filtered through to Nina. Nina interprets the questions, sends the response back to Laura, and then those answers are disseminated.
I know it sounds incredibly awkward and time consuming, but that's the way it works in most of the towns that I know. It doesn't, if you have, I think some of you are going to have the same questions.
Yeah,
And if you've got like 4 people asking the same question on different days, hopefully you all get the same answer, but it's still time consuming. It's in terms of Nina's time to be answering, 4 different people with the same question.
well, that's
You
why
think
I was
that makes
suggesting,
sense?
I was sort of suggesting, but it's being rejected as a pre-meet where we could,
Excuse me, it's not that it's being rejected, Bill. We can't do it legally. It's not the way government works. I'm sorry for getting a little frustrated with this, but it's not the way it
yeah,
works.
no, listen, I get it, but I guess
You
that,
know, and
I'm just
quite
trying to
frankly,
tell-
you're all into a second or a third year on the planning board. You've done 20 to 30 site plan reviews already. There should be questions that will come up specific to this application. But if there are questions that come up at a 5,000-foot level still about the role of the planning board in site plan review, then those need to be flushed out with Laura.
I
don't know
think,
how else to handle it. That meets the needs of an open meeting law, okay, and the processes that have been put in place. The fact of the matter is that the planning board is fortunate in that that Laura and I are allowed to contact and call and spend time and therefore money with town council without having to go through the town administrator, which other departments have to do.
right,
So believe it or not, we're actually in a good relative position.
She's saying it could be worse, Bill.
yeah, no, I
Right?
gather.
I mean, it used to be that you'd ask the question to Dave Ramsey. Dave Ramsey would filter it and talk to Nina to make sure that Nina got the question in the way that he wanted the answer given. That then went back to the border committee that asked the question.
Wait,
That's
So-
terrible.
It's, no wonder government is just so efficient.
So
Yeah,
at least now, Laura and I can get on the phone with Nina. And as we did last week, we spent what, 45 minutes, almost an hour, Laura, me and Jody with Nina. And it was a great conversation.
but you can have the conversation with Nina because you're the chair.
Well, to your point, a quorum cannot,
yeah,
okay?
Bill, this is what I was saying, like, it could
Right,
be
so
you and one
if
other.
Laura, if Laura feels after you've all talked to her, okay, that there are two of you that really need to talk directly to Nina. Not three of you, but two of you.
Yeah,
And she can set that up.
okay.
Can't be three of
Yeah,
you,
I'd be
can't three of
happy
you.
to set
right?
that up.
That might have been the point that I was missing, but
But Laura's the filter of it, and she'll say, you know what, given everything, hey, George and Bill, let's see if we can set up a time with Nina, because you both have similar concerns.
thank you. Great.
I have concerns too, Carol. I need to be included.
And then there'll be,
God,
let's see,
you and I don't matter.
I don't remember the math. When you
Somebody
have,
else wants to be included too.
even my dog's frustrated with it. If you have 5 members and you have how many different groups of 2 do you have that can meet with the
There you
lawyer?
go.
That's an
Yeah, that was
SAT
my next
question.
question, Carol.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
The joys of
Sorry,
government.
sorry to hold everybody up.
It's like, why did 2 bathrooms at the community center 10 years ago cost $500,000? The joys of government.
Mhm.
But not to worry, there are ways to make sure, if you spend the time and communicate with Laura, that you should feel comfortable the time you go into a meeting. Okay, to have your thoughts and questions answered.
We'll make sure of it.
Just
We'll
not
make
as
sure of it.
efficient as most of us would do in our other lives,
Yeah.
Private sector.
right? But with our government hats on, there are ways to do it. It's just different. Okay,
Great.
okie
Thank you,
dokie.
everybody.
So have a good week, everybody, and see you a week from today.
Thank you.
Thank
Okay.
you. Have a
Thank
good
you, guys.
night.
Bye.
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 Bye-bye.